welcome to Lincolnshire County Council Planning and Regulation Committee. It's the 2nd of October 2023, 10:30 a.m. I'm Councillor Ian Fleetwood. To my immediate right, to your left on video, I have Councillor Charlotte Vernon, who's my Vice Chairman. In the pit in the middle, I have various democratic officers and planning officers. Further afield, we've got highways and planning officers. To my right, I've got a planning committee, and I'm expecting a couple of speakers to pop in and out at various points in the meeting. It is Monday morning. We have had the fire alarm tested, so if you do hear a fire alarm, please exit the building to my rear, going out to the front of the building, congregate in the car park where we will make a count of you. We don't want to leave anybody inside. Refreshments wise, there is water at the back if anybody should need it, so no problems there. Item 1 is apologies replacement members, and I think we've got 1 or 2 today.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Ashton, Councillor Ashley Morris, Councillor Carrington, Councillor Hall and Councillor Reid. We also have Councillor Murray replacing Councillor Mrs. Kelly until further notice.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Murray. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Obviously, you can declare now or at any time during the meeting should you wish, if something crops up during the agenda. I can't see anybody indicating, so I'll move on. Oh, we can. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for a point of clarity, obviously with the NSIPs further down the agenda, it's on my DPI form that I work for Sir Edward Lee, but he's made various comments, but just that I haven't discussed it with him, but I am aware that it's a notable topic of conversation and discussion for obvious reasons, so just to declare that interest.
Thank you very much. Obviously, with regard to issues like that, we can deal with them at the point, should it be necessary. Item 3 then is minutes of the previous meeting, 4th of September. You can see the minutes in front of us. I think that my Vice Chairman's had a little brief word with me a couple of moments ago. Charlotte was with us, Councillor Vernon was with us virtually at the last meeting, but not in the meeting room. It's not noted within the minutes, if that could be accommodated. Thank you. Anybody else, any comments with regard to the minutes previously circulated? I'm quite happy to move them. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Smith. All in favour? Thank you. Okay, that is clearly carried. I'll therefore move you on to, I think that we do have somebody coming in to speak with regard to item 4.1. I believe that Councillor Hill wishes to speak to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change those two around so that potentially Councillor Hill can be found. I hear footsteps. And that's great. Okay, I won't move those two items around then. I'll move back to the agenda and go to item 4.1, which is the A15 Harmston Crossroads to Greenman Road. Proposed 40-mile-an-hour limit. Jan Gibson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jan Gibson, Programme Leader for Traffic. This first report relates to a review of the national speed limit along the A15 between the junction with Tower Lane that leads to Harpston and Greenman Road to Navenby. Next slide, please. This stretch also includes the B1202 crossroads, and there have been 27 personal injury collisions in the last 5 years along this stretch. As a potential measure to reduce accidents, the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership contacted my team asking us to review this stretch, see if the speed limit could be reduced. We carried out an assessment as a rural limit and the criteria were met. We completed 3 speed surveys within the areas shown to ascertain the mean speed of traffic, which we use to set the level of limit. Next slide, please. So to the north, near Tower Lane, there was a mean speed of 44. Next slide, please. And further south, mean speeds of 42 near the crossroads and 45 further south. At 42, that length meets the criteria for a 40-mile-an-hour limit, whereas the other two meet for a borderline case, and therefore it will be at the discretion of this committee whether or not a 40-mile-an-hour limit is pursued along this length. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a visiting member, the leader actually, who wishes to speak to this application. So, Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Although I'm not a local member, I know this particular road very well for the last 20 years or more. I've been coming up and down the A15 on a regular basis several times a week, so I do know the road particularly well. And to say I'm surprised, I mean, it wasn't, the recommendation was actually for 40, it wasn't for, it's up to members, because I've seen other papers, for example, the Rossby proposed speed limit, it was marginal, and what it actually said was, well, it's up to members. The actual recommendation, which I have to find very, very surprising for one of the main arterial routes throughout the county that we are proposing to go down, the proposal is to put it down to 40. When you think of the A15, I think of the recently installed speed limits at Lessingham and at Hazelby, they're 50. On this particular road, there are no, I don't believe there are, maybe one, there's not any, there's some side roads. And I think I would accept, and I think we all agree, that those who know that particular road, there is an issue there with people going east-west who use the dogleg on the A15, and there is an issue there. As we are well aware, there are average speed cameras on that section of the road, so I think that needs to be borne in mind. And indeed, you know, when those speed cameras will be catching people who probably feel, say at 9 o'clock at night, they're going along thinking they're driving perfectly safely at 50 miles an hour, they will be fined, and obviously that will have a result for the Road Safety Partnership. I think I really do question the validity of these speed sections, because as I drive during a busy time of the day, and like today, this morning, I drove up and I was doing 40 quite, in fact, most of the time you're doing 50. I think what you also need to understand is there's a lot of crop drying, grass drying goes along this particular road, so effectively during the summer, during the daytime, there are tractors going up and down most of the working day, doing less than 40 actually, so you're often queuing behind them, or you're queuing, driving slowly behind a straw lorry or something. So your average speed at that time of the day probably would be 40-ish. At night, however, or in the winter, it's a different story, and the average speed would seem to be reasonable at 60. So I can understand, because of the issues at this crossroads, that 50, I think most people will probably feel that 50 would seem to be a reasonable compromise. I haven't had time to, I mean, I've had all the data in terms of what the roads and what the accidents, or the severity of the accidents as well. For example, there was an accident this morning I came by, but there was just people, a bit of bent cars and people on their phones getting it sorted out. So I think we also need to take into account what we're doing. And I think I do, in a more general point, I'm getting more concerned about where lots of speed limits have been put in recently, that how many people are actually taking any notice of them. Because I think we used to have a percentile speed way of looking at it. That's, for some reason, that's been abandoned. And I just said, personally, I don't think this 40 is the right way forward. 50, I think, would be a reasonable way forward. And talking to some of the members who've contacted me, I think that is a general view amongst councillors. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments. I've also had contact very recently with Councillor Wright, who is a county councillor, but also the leader of NKDC, and he's made comments along the lines of the A15 being an artery through Lincolnshire, economic development, and also the fact that with this section of road, it seems a little strange that the B1188 going through Branston and all the various villages, Ruskington, has got a speed limit of 50 miles an hour on it going through the villages, yet you end up with a main artery, the A15, where there is not so many villages along it, and the proposal here is to take it down to 40. So, and I believe Councillor Carrington also supports those comments as well. So with that, I don't know if you want to comment at all, Jan, or shall I just, I'll open it to committee and I'll go straight over. Oh, behind me, I'll go to Mr. Fenwick.
Sorry, Chairman. I hope it's okay that I speak. I haven't got a name card, but I'm Richard Fenwick. I'm Head of Highways Asset and Local Management Services, so my service area covers both the Traffic Regulation Orders team and the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership. I did just want to cover some of the detail for members that the mean speed that Jan was talking about that was observed is the reason that this is being presented as a borderline case for members to consider. So there was no proposal from the Road Safety Partnership that this should be a 40. It was just, could you look at the speed limit? And the way our policy is currently set is the mean speed that is observed will determine what the limit would be. Because it was on a borderline, that is why it's been presented. So members are able to consider that and potentially consider a higher limit of the 50. Also, the next steps in this process, and Jan will correct me if I'm wrong, would be that whatever the result of today, it still would need to go to full public consultation for the public to have their view and express that to us, and it would still need to come back to Planning and Regulation Committee anyway for a final decision. I just wanted to clarify that.
So thank you for those comments. So I'll move over to Councillor Mrs Overton, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I represent the Navenby area, and I used to represent Humston and Colby, but now names Navenby, so it is adjacent to this area, and it does certainly impact on my residents. I have to say, when I saw 40, I was surprised. Like Councillor Hill, I did feel that was out of kilter. When you look at the A607, which incidentally used to have just as high an accident rate, on the A607, that stretch, we had that accident rate. And we had to make changes. We made the changes of the junctions. So, for example, at Boothby, if you come across the heath, it's no longer straight across down. If you're coming along, you don't realise you're about to cross a big road. People were going straight across. So we made those changes to the junctions, which helped. Then we made changes to the speed limit as well, bringing it down to 50, and that has helped. And I have to say, at the moment, I feel with if we wanted things to be consistent, then you would put 50 there, because it would be a sense that if we want these speed limits to be enforceable, they've got to make sense to local people. And if the others are 50, and this is, as we said, an arterial route also, and it was suddenly 40, without the villages and the other things that are on the way quite so much, I think it would not be, it'd be very hard to make that enforceable, because it's not, it doesn't feel right to people driving along. So I think it would be good to go out to public consultation, as has been said. I would support and propose, I think, because I'm on the committee, propose the 50 as being a sensible way forward and well supported by others, as already been mentioned. And also in the future, and I'm glad we've got the highways people here, Richard Fenwick from Highways, is to have a look at those junctions and see if anything more could be done, because they are, particularly the one at Navenby, residents do say to me that they are afraid to use that. They do not want to go that way at all. They do not think that's a safe junction. So perhaps there are things we can do with the junction as well in the future, but that's separate, as it was separate with the A607. That's a separate issue, but it will need looking at. But at the moment, we're looking at the speed limit, and I would propose, as has been suggested, the 50 mile an hour speed limit along this stretch. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to go slightly differently in that rather than proposing a 50, I think that we should probably defer this one and allow it then to go back to the highways section to actually go and examine exactly what is required at this location. My problem with putting a 50 in or a 40 is that there is potentially an issue of displacement. If you were to put a 40 mile an hour limit there, certainly you would then be displacing all the vehicles going from this road, if you were an HGV driver, you could potentially use the 607 or the 1188 in preference, because you could get potentially a little more ground speed and save a few more minutes. But the issue is both of those routes go through villages. This is nearly a clear run. There's not so many locations, and this route also has the connection to the Lincoln Eastern bypass on a good roundabout. So you wouldn't really want to be diverting vehicles across onto the 607 and then doing the dog leg across from Harmston back onto the A15 to get onto the Eastern bypass. So I think we should just defer this and move it straight back to the highways officers and let them consider where it really does need to be. So I think that rather than trying to put a speed limit on it, I don't think that's fair. I think we should go back, see where it goes, then from there bring it back to committee, and then at that point go out and do public consultation. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. This reminds me very much of the speed limit application last month on the A46 past the police HQ. That was passed, but I know that will come back for public consultation. And much like the comments of the leader, there is not a, pardon my French, cat in hell's chance that people will do 40 mile an hour along that stretch. There are issues with the junctions on that stretch, especially by that section of road. That is what the problem is, not the issue of speed. I drive that road every day, Chairman. You can't do, if you can actually do a speed limit on that road, you're doing quite well. Coming back to this application, I certainly endorse the comments of other colleagues that 40 is far too excessive a decision to make. It is a main arterial route, and as you say, Chairman, if you do that, people will find other ways, not just HGV drivers, but drivers generally will find other ways where they can get to and from quicker. I am quite happy to second your motion, Chairman, to defer this on that basis, so that rather than just imposing a 50 mile an hour limit, we send this back so that stock can be taken and the right decisions made, so we don't have a situation that I think we're going to have based on the one from last month. I think we should be avoiding situations like that as much as we can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pepper.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We've had similar instances to this in the past, and we've told in the past that when the committee disagrees with the actual recommendation, when we've got our own ideas of what the speed limit should be, that wasn't a choice. It was either we went along with the recommendation or it was refused. We didn't have a second chance to say it should be at this level. So I think you've got the right approach, Mr. Chairman. I was prepared to second it. That has been done, and I think that is the correct way forward.
I will give Jan an opportunity to come back if you wish. No? Okay, so I'll therefore put it to committee then that Councillor Mrs Overton.
Chairman, I appreciate your point. My only concern is that the officers have carried out our policy, and our policy has come to the 40 on that stretch. And that's why, can they really come up with a different solution? How can an officer come up with a different solution with no different information? I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can help me on that one. But it does seem to me that, that from what's been said, we all feel that 40 would be too little. It has an accident rate of 37 accidents in 5 years, which I think is quite high. 37 is quite a lot. So that will carry on if we don't do something. So I would suggest that a lot of the work's already done. Perhaps we could just go with this now, and it's only going out for consultation. We're not asking for any decisions to be made today. What we're asking for is what to put on the consultation. If people get a consultation and it says 40, they'll think we're daft, won't they? From those people who live there and understand the local area. So I would suggest that just for the consultation, and that's all we're doing at this stage, we just go for the 50 to go out for consultation and then see what comes back. And then the highways and the officers will need to look at that, and then it comes back. Thank you. Just a stage in the process.
Thank you for your comments. My view on that is that if we are going to go out to public consultation, I'd rather go out to public consultation with what is deemed to be the correct information at that point, and to have the full set of facts so that we are potentially not misleading the public. We need to be sure what we're offering. The officers have said that it's potentially a borderline issue and there was issues attached to it. So I think that really we need to go back and re-examine the data. So that's why I came forward with the proposal to defer. So on that basis, I will offer it to the meeting. I have proposed, Councillor Smith has seconded, that we defer this and let the officers go back and have a check through what they've actually got on file and just ensure that we are going in the right direction, then come back with a further proposal. Okay, all in favour please show now. Thank you. Those against please show. That's 2, 3 against and the other 7, 4. So therefore that is carried. Thank you very much. So I'll move you on to item 4.2, which is Lincoln permit parking zone 5B, 5C, 5D, the proposed amendments to the list of streets. So back to the officer, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. This relates to the inclusion of additional properties into the recently introduced permit zones in Lincoln. The request has come from City of Lincoln Council for these additional properties to be included within each of the 3 recently introduced zones. Next slide, please. So zones 5B, 5C and 5D are recently being introduced, and the proposal is to add in additional properties on the High Street and on Cannock Road. Next slide, please. Those on the High Street are shown outlined in red on this slide. Next slide, please. And those on Cannock Road are shown as Appendix C. This will necessitate an amendment to the orders that we've made, as we need to change what's itemised in the list of streets. So we've completed a statutory consultation process for this and received some objections. The main objection is that this will increase pressure on the permit zones, and additional permit holders will be in competition with those already in receipt of permits. However, prior to the introduction of these schemes, the businesses and residents in the areas to be included used to use these areas to park, and alternative parking is situated some considerable distance away. This being the case, it's officer's recommendation that the objections are overruled so that we can proceed with this amendment to the list of streets as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any speakers wishing to comment with regard to this application, so I'll go to committee and Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Chairman. Obviously, I'll support this. And I walked around the area the other day, and the RPS scheme has transformed the area. Previously, you couldn't move for parked cars between the hours of 8 till 6. Now it's much better. The environment for the residents is much better, and I welcome that, and I support the proposal.
Okay, so a supporter there from Councillor Murray. I'm quite happy to move the recommendation. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to the recommendation? Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Skinner. Okay, are there any other speakers? Okay, proposed, seconded that the scheme as printed is adopted. Proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Skinner. All in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So with that, we've now dealt with the traffic issues. Thank you, Jan, for coming today. And we will move over to item 5, which is other reports. And the first one is 5.1, application by Cotton Solar Project Limited. And I think we're going to go for a change in planning officer, and potentially we've had a mass exodus to the rear of us. And I believe we have a couple of speakers to this application. I don't know if they're in the room or they're online. Okay, I'm getting a nod, so whenever you're ready, Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. Yeah, this is the first of 2 papers this morning relating to development consent order applications that are in the county. The first one is at Cotton, and the paper in front of you
sets out the details. Just first thing to make you aware of, in the description on the front of the paper, there's an error there in terms of the application by Cottam Solar for a development consent order to install solar PV to generate, it says 530, that should be 600 megawatts, so apologies for that, and that's clear throughout the rest of the report. But yeah, so this proposal is for solar. You'll see the description there. It also incorporates an element of battery storage and associated other infrastructure, including access provision and an underground 400 kV cable, which would link to the Cottam substation on the other side of the Trent in Nottinghamshire. So the paper before you sets out the council's role in the development consent order process. Essentially, it is of two parts: to provide the examining authority with a local impact report setting out the issues which the council want to bring to the examining authority's attention, and there's a process there to identify whether there's negative, neutral or positive impacts associated with the development and the various topics. And also, ultimately, the council is required to provide the examining authority with its written views on the proposal. The local impact report provides the evidence base to enable the council to provide its written comments on the application. Also, just draw your attention in terms of a local impact report. A paper or a report was circulated this morning. Apologies that this came in very late. That's the Soils and Agricultural Land Classification Report, which is mentioned in the local impact report. That wasn't available when the papers were circulated, and that's been circulated to you this morning. But the local impact report does contain the thrust of that report. So whilst the full details have been provided to you this morning, I did have other information in advance, so that basically the highlights from that report were already incorporated into the local impact report. So I can just move to the presentation to start off with. The first slide, just basically to give you an idea of the number of solar projects that are in both, I suppose, the East Midlands area, but in Lincolnshire in particular. So you can see that within the Lincolnshire boundary, there are a significant number of solar projects for development consent orders. Outside the county, there's just a couple of other projects that are shown on that plan, and you can see that the vast majority are within the Lincolnshire administrative boundary. Obviously today we're looking at Cottam from this paper, and then the subsequent paper will look at Heckington. The projects are all at different stages of the development consent order process. Some are currently in the examination stage, others are at pre-application stage, and those will eventually work their way to come in front of the committee for, again, a decision as to the nature of a local impact report and the council's comments on those proposals. Next slide, please. So this next slide just focuses in a bit more detail in the West Lindsey area. The Cottam proposal is shown in green on the plan there, and the other development consent orders projects that are at various stages are also shown. So you can see just to the west there, outlined in red, is the Gate Burton project, which councillors gave their comments on back in July, and that project is currently at examination. Between the green there, in a sort of purple colour is Tilbridge Solar, which is currently at the pre-application stage, and the application for that project is expected to be submitted later this year. And then sort of to the south is West Burton. That project was, for the examination, was due to start last month, but the preliminary meeting for that project has been adjourned and will take, will start again later this year, and then that project will be brought to the committee as well. So this is just to show you, I think previously councillors have asked about the extent of the various projects in the West Lindsey area, and this plan just sets out the locations of those different projects and their proximity to each other. Next slide, please. And this final slide just shows the Cotton project on its own. So you can see that it's defined into sort of 4 distinct areas. So the first area, sort of Cotton 1, is around the Sturton by Stow area, and you can see that that is the largest proportion of the project area. And then moving north to Cotton 2, which is, you can see just to the north of the A631, and then finally Cottons 3A and 3B are at the top there, close to Blyton, and then leading through the connection is a cable route which comes from the northern sections down through each of those different sectors, and then travels westwards over the River Trent, or under the River Trent, to link into the Cotton substation. So that's just to give you a context of the location of the project. And if I just bring you to the paper. The paper, as I say, sets out the council's role in terms of these development consent orders, basically to provide a local impact report to the examining authority, and also the council's written views on the project. Without going through the local impact in sort of great detail, what I'll just draw to the committee's attention is those areas where we've identified some particular issues. So whilst, as you see in the report, that the positives of the project have been identified in terms of producing clean, renewable energy that would support the nation's transition to a low-carbon future, and also deliver some significant biodiversity net gains through the creation of mitigation and enhancements. The concerns that are drawn to your attention are those negative impacts which have been identified through both council officers who have identified some particular issues, and also consultants who have been instructed by the council to look at 2 areas in particular: the landscape and visual impact of the impacts of the project, and also to look at the impacts on agricultural land and the agricultural land classification, which I mentioned the report for that was circulated this morning. So certainly in terms of landscape, again, in terms of a local impact report attached to that, there's a detailed review of the landscape impacts associated with the project, and the conclusions from that are that both individually and cumulatively with the other projects, there is a negative impact on the landscape of this area, essentially turning what is currently an agricultural landscape into one which would be very much dominated by solar infrastructure and a sort of energy infrastructure landscape. And those issues have been identified in that report, and are part of the concerns that are identified in this report. Moving on, in terms of public rights of way, concerns have been identified for users of the public right of way from the impacts of the proposed development. And also at this stage, there's some concerns about the need to divert and undertake some works to some public rights of way that cross the site, and whether at the moment there's a appropriate mechanism in place to ensure that those public rights of way which are affected by the project are reinstated to a suitable condition at the end of the construction phase, and also around the diversion of those public rights of way where needed. And finally, in relation to cultural heritage, in particular archaeology, there's a concern that's been identified in terms of the amount of work that's been undertaken at the pre-application stage in terms of trial trenching to identify areas where there would be or potentially might be some underground historic assets. And the view of your council officers is the amount of trial trenching that has been undertaken and has been brought forward with the application is insufficient to enable potential areas of archaeological interest to be identified. So for that reason, we're also suggesting that there's a issue or a negative impact raised on that point, because at the moment we don't feel that we have sufficient information to fully assess and identify potential archaeological remains which might be disturbed by this project. So with all that in mind, I draw you to the recommendation, which is that the committee approve the local impact report, which is attached as an appendix to this report, and also in terms of the County Council's response, written response to the examining authority, that the wording set out as part B of the recommendation is submitted to the examining authority, setting out the council's concerns with this project.
Thank you very much. I do have two speakers with regard to this application. I believe the applicant is somewhere to be seen, Ian Douglas and Keith Browning. I don't know. Eve Browning, correct. So if you'd like to come down and share the time. Good, I'm pleased you've got that going. I was just about to go for a stopwatch. So we can allow you 3 minutes to address the committee, and then from there, potentially there might be a question or two from the committee, and then we'll debate the recommendations. So the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Hello, I would like to introduce myself as Eve Browning, the Project Development Manager working for Island Green Power, who are the developer of Cottam Solar Project. With me and also able to answer questions today is Ian Douglas from LandPro, who are the planning consultants responsible for compiling the DCO planning application. Over the last 2.5 years, the project team of Cottam Solar Project have built a good working relationship with Lincolnshire County Council and its officers, and I would like to express my gratitude for this. The regular meetings we have with the Council are informative and productive and have helped us shape our application. From October 2024, Great Britain will no longer use coal to generate electricity. We know demand for electricity is continuing to increase and that the UK faces some of the highest electricity costs in Europe. There is a clear need for renewable, affordable and reliable energy. The decommissioning of the coal-fired Cottam Power Station, where this project will connect to the national grid, presents a great opportunity to repower the region with clean, green energy. Cottam Solar Project is being developed by Island Green Power, who are a leading international developer of renewable energy projects, committed to responsible land use, and who believe that the development and delivery of large-scale solar farms can be achieved in harmony with their surroundings. As all at this meeting are aware, there are a significant number of NSIP-scale solar projects emerging in Lincolnshire, but I am here today to focus on the Cottam Solar Project specifically. We are pleased to see and acknowledge the positives in the local impact report, noted at paragraph 24 of the committee report. such as the strong contribution towards net zero and significant biodiversity net gain. There have also been some negatives identified and summarised within paragraph 25. On these, I would make the following comments. On landscape and visual, we continue the dialogue with the Council on landscape and visual impacts, both standalone and cumulatively, and will be submitting additional information to the examination as has been requested for further consideration. On agricultural land grade, in isolation, there is only a very small loss of best and most versatile agricultural land associated with the Cottam Solar project, actually only 4% of the total land take, and only until the point at which the project is decommissioned. On public rights of way, no public rights of way are intended to be lost or diverted permanently as a consequence of the development, and we intend to have further discussions with the new public rights of way officer over matters raised. A new permissive path is also proposed. And on archaeology, I can confirm that we are in disagreement with the Council over the approach to archaeological investigation, but we continue to try to iron out these areas of disagreement, and there is a meeting to discuss further tomorrow. Finally, I note the recommendation for a community benefit scheme to be established. The Cottam Solar project has committed throughout the development process to providing a package of community benefits and underwent initial conversations with the Lincolnshire Community Foundation to start off that process. We would welcome further discussion with the Council to firm up proposals further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you are just 2 seconds within time, so that's excellent. Okay, committee, do you have any questions of the developers at all? Councillor Mrs Overton.
You say that there is only 4% of most versatile land. I think you mean, I'm presuming you mean grades 1 to 3A, and you're saying there's only 4%. I'm just concerned, I wonder how many trials you've done, because I think you're only required to do something like 1 hectare, which in our experience in a field will change significantly from perhaps 2 to grade 4 in one field. So I wonder how certain you are of those trials, and has anybody else done an independent assessment on the soils? Thank you.
I mean, there is a substantial agricultural land classification exercise, which is a survey that's been carried out that's submitted with our application. And as Mr McBride has mentioned, that's been peer reviewed by yourselves, which is the report that I think came in quite late to today. So that's been, as I understand it, from the your report, the report to you today, and the local impact report, that I don't believe that is being questioned in terms of the methodology that's been employed to assess and to come to that conclusion. I don't know whether Mr McBride wants to add anything to that.
That's fine. It's you that's answering the question, so that's fine. Thank you very much. Can I just ask also about the land? It's not in one patch. It's in lots of different patches. Is it in one ownership, or is this secure, that land is secured? How come you've chosen those pieces?
So there is a chapter in the planning application called site selection, and that does go through the process of how we found the sites and how they have been assessed against other areas of land. The ownership of the land, there's a number of different landowners, and they are secured by option agreements. So those landowners that are hosting solar panels are all willing landowners.
Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you. It appears that we've just considered the grading of the land. We've not looked at any point the productivity of the land, because meadowland and grass has a value, and it feeds other things, you know. So as long as if reading this report, it's like tipped away, grade 3, etc. And I find it rather concerning that it's blased away, because that land has a value, and it has a production value to this country, and it's just been binned off as far as I'm concerned. My other concern here would be, yeah, it's going out of the county, the power is. What's it actually doing for the county? It's stopping productivity on the agricultural side, which would add to the net value of what the county produce. So all this is actually going away without having much in major. There won't be any 106. There won't be any benefits the local area. So, yeah, it's really what's in it for us, because I can't see anything at this point.
I think there's 2 points there. I'll come back on the agricultural land aspect first, and then maybe we can pick up on the benefits. I mean, as you're probably aware, I don't want to preach to you, but the planning system deals with best and most versatile agricultural land, which is grade 1, 2 and 3A. Clearly, yes, 3B and other agricultural land can be productive, that's not question, but in terms of the tests that we need to meet in this application, it's about the impact on best and most versatile land, and that's what we've included in our application that's been put to the Secretary of State. Eve, I don't know if you wanted to come back on.
Can I just come back on that? You asked for us to challenge your methodology, and that's just what I've done. Sure. In doing that, you purely based it on soil, not on the productivity of the land, not on what that land produces for this nation. And I think that's a little bit flawed, apparently, to me, anyway. And thank you.
In terms of community benefits, as I mentioned, there is an intention to provide community benefits. It is a bit of a sort of strange thing that a lot of the time community benefits are kind of considered separately from the planning decisions themselves, so they don't tend to get weighed in the planning balance. But it is our intention to provide a package of community benefits, and as mentioned in my speech, we have conducted initial discussions with Lincolnshire Community Foundation on that basis.
And I agree, that is very positive, but that's not quite what I was saying. What I'm saying is there's a lot of large solar activity planned, and there's nothing been happening for the infrastructure of this county. And the infrastructure of this county is very poor in places. In fact, there are towns that are struggling to put EV points in because the infrastructure's not that good. And all I'm seeing is large applications and nothing put back. And it's as simple as that. What's in it for us? Thank you.
And it is true, I suppose, these projects are nationally significant projects. So as you say, the electricity generated by them goes into the transmission system rather than the local distribution network, although it could then filter down into the local distribution network. So things like EV points and EV chargers could be something that could be looked at in terms of the Community Benefit Fund.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just to come back on Councillor Skinner's point, that's missing the point entirely, because actually, if there was something genuine for, as you said, Councillor Skinner, what was in it for us, then what could be done is, well, because you're dealing with this infrastructure, well, your electricity is going to cost you less because you've had the harm, you've had the land taken, you've had the growing land taken, you've got essentially, if you like, the eyesore of it and the change of your land. But no, we get the same rate as everybody else from this, Chairman, and it doesn't really answer Councillor Skinner's question at all of what's in it for us, because I don't think you can put, I'm not asking you a question because I don't think you can answer it, Chairman, but I think it needs to be said.
So this is specifically for questions of the applicant, it isn't for statements or something similar. We need to, if you have a question of the applicant, please make it now. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the contribution towards net zero, because reading the report, it seems like it could be a very substantial contribution in getting us away as a country from using fossil fuels.
Okay, so
The question is, could you elaborate on the contribution that this project could make in terms of getting towards net zero?
Yes, so as Neil McBride mentioned, there is the grid connection for this project is 600 megawatts worth of power. So these solar panels can produce 600 megawatts worth of renewable energy. The Cottam coal-powered station was 2 gigawatts. So although it doesn't make up for the entirety of the Cottam power station, it makes almost a third of that power, which was produced by coal, would now be replaced and produced by renewable sources. And that is why, and I know that's sort of the question has been raised as to why so many in Lincolnshire, why so many NSIP scale solar projects in Lincolnshire, and it's government policy obviously to increase the amount of solar power we get, and Lincolnshire does have the infrastructure to support it, Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire, where the power stations are located, so we can connect to that and make that contribution towards net zero. There's also a climate change chapter in the environmental statement which deals with assessing the carbon footprint of the panels and the electricity that it would be displacing having been generated from other sources. So that one goes into a lot more detail about its contribution towards net zero.
Councillor Mrs Overton, you wanted to come back?
Thank you. Yes, we have considered the cumulative impact of so many applications previously, and I wondered if you've any thoughts on that, because there's 2,800 acres, I think, if I read the thing correctly, which does seem to be a lot, and I wonder if you could comment on the cumulative impact. And also, you said it could produce 600. Presumably that's if the sun shines all the time. You know, how does that work exactly? Although I see you've got the batteries. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just pick up on the approach to the cumulative impacts. So our application has had to consider cumulative impacts as required by the environmental impact assessment regulations that govern the application material that we need to submit, and also the relevant national planning policy statements that relate to NSIP projects require cumulatives to be considered. And from a cumulatives perspective, what our application does is it looks at the cumulative impacts of the 3 development land parcels that that are part of the Cottam project. So the interactions associated with them, say for example during construction, and also the visual impact. So we've had to look at those, and then at a sort of second tier of that is the cumulative impact associated with these other projects. Obviously, particularly in the locality of Cottam, with West Burton, Tilbridge, as Mr McBride has mentioned. So the cumulative impact associated with those, and of course, because they're in quite close proximity to each other, it raises issues, particularly in relation to landscape and visual impacts and other issues. And then looking further afield into the county, in terms of the other projects where perhaps there isn't an interaction from a visual perspective, but what is the impact in terms of loss of best and most versatile agricultural land? So all of those aspects need to be considered in the application. I think there was a second part to the question.
Yes, so about the generation sort of profile of it. So yes, obviously the 600 megawatts would be produced when the infrastructure is generating at sort of maximum power, although we can install solar panels so that there are more solar panels than would be sort of strictly necessary to just hit the 600 megawatts at maximum power. So instead we put more solar panels in, and then the 600 megawatts can be hit at a wider range of solar radiation. And then the batteries, as you mentioned, there's also a proposal for a battery plant within the project, and that would also be of the 600 megawatt scale. So our grid connection offer is for 600 megawatts in and out. So it means that we can also charge the batteries from the solar panels. So if there was a day where it was extremely sunny and obviously there was a lot of generation happening but not so much demand, we could charge the batteries up and save that power, store it for later when there's higher demand and lower solar radiation, and then it can go export back to the grid to be used at peak times.
Oh, sorry, how many acres are the battery covering? And it's lithium, presumably.
It is lithium-ion is the proposed technology for now, and then yeah, the number of batteries, I'm afraid I'd probably have to come back to you in terms of the exact amounts.
Area? You have an area marked on your map, won't you? Not that I've seen a map.
It is identified on a plan in the application. We can provide that information.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Okay, so thank you very much. If you'd like to retire, I'll go back to Mr McBride and ask him if he'd like to make any comments. In the in-between, we've mentioned West Lindsey, and I must point out that I am leader of the Conservative group at West Lindsey and leader of the opposition at West Lindsey and part of their planning committee, but I don't believe any of those three items preclude me from speaking or voting with regard to this application. So, Mr McBride.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just to, confirm the point made by Councillor Skinner in terms of the agricultural land classification report, it does note that only 4% of the project area would be what's classed as best and most versatile agricultural land, but a significant proportion will be land that's classified as 3B. And the report does make note that that can also produce, obviously, significant yields in terms of agricultural land. And I think that's a point that we will continue to make to the examining authority, that just because only a very small percentage of this site is what's classed as best and most versatile land, it doesn't mean that the rest of the site doesn't produce any sort of benefit from an agricultural perspective as well. So I just wanted to make that point. And the other issue in terms of the methodology, the detailed report does confirm that the methodology that's been undertaken by the applicant is robust in terms of looking at best and most versatile land. So the figures that are being produced can be relied on.
Thank you very much. I'll therefore open it to committee. See if anyone would like to speak. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I make my points, I just want to check with Mr McBride. As we're not decision makers, we can't be accused of predetermination in future. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. It's important to note several points. Firstly, that there is an objection on archaeological grounds. This is the first application in a number of years I've been on various planning committees I have ever seen an objection on agricultural grounds. Additionally, as the growth team state, it has not seen any energy-related benefits locally from the scheme. I would contend, Chairman, as I've said already, that's because, quite simply, there aren't any for the local area. This is being used as one of the sacrificial lambs on the altar of net zero. The economic and social harm this and other NSIPs will do locally cannot be understated. I believe that if all are given consent, this will be Lincolnshire's at Ravenscraig, and I don't know if anybody has actually been round the outside of the Ravenscraig, Chairman. I have. It's a massive area that used to be, as you well know, a huge industrial hub in Scotland. It is now a wasteland and there is nothing there, and there are still shops that can't be rented as a result of that decision about 50 odd years later, and this is what risks befalling Lincolnshire if all these applications go through. Secondly, Chairman, with regard to paragraph 18, as I've said on this issue previously, once these panels are in situ, the land will never fully go back to what it was previously because the hard standing can't be totally removed, Chairman, so it will have a negative impact on the grading of the land where these sit. Thirdly, Chairman, it's clear our own consultants have concerns with the LVIA and deem it to be inadequate and not fit for purpose. This adds further concern to the whole process that even more harm could occur than we're even aware of. As a result of this being an NSIP, Chairman, as you'll know, we're powerless to do anything, but I would urge representations are firmly put to the Secretary of State that the LVIA is not fit for purpose, and should he be minded to grant the DCO, conditions are imposed requiring a fit and proper purpose LVIA for this to happen. Finally, Chairman, it does not explicitly state in the document that we believe that this application should be refused as it does in the upcoming agenda item. I would ask that this is amended so that it explicitly states as such, Chairman, because contrary to the best most versatile agricultural land issue with regards to 3B, as Mr McBride will be aware when I've asked this question before, in real terms, nobody really can tell you the difference. It is a technicality, Chairman, and who is to say in 20 years' time that we're not going to need that land to grow food because we don't know what's going to happen to the climate in 20 years. And this application is also open-ended, Chairman. There is no date for when this order ends, and that is deeply disturbing. So I would also suggest in our report, if it's not in there, that we ask the Secretary of State for an end date, because to have an open-ended application, this would not happen if it was an application for mineral extraction or anything else that was here before us, or at the district council, Chairman, it would have an end date, and for it not to is disturbing, because that means the applicant can carry on for infinitum, and the Secretary of State or even ourselves would be powerless to review or do anything. And I think we would do the people of Lincolnshire a disservice if we allowed that, Chairman. And I fully support the recommendation, Chairman, to refuse this application. Although I know we're not the decision makers, but I fully support that to go to the Secretary of State, because I believe it's wholly inappropriate and will do untold harm to Lincolnshire, and especially the locals, residents who it impacts the most, and I'm quite happy to move it on that basis.
Mr McBride, a fair amount in there. Would you like to comment on any of it?
Yeah, I think just a couple of points in terms of I suppose, longevity of a project. Councillor Smith is correct that at the moment there isn't a proposed end date for the development to cease. The environmental statement has been assessed on a 40-year basis, although clearly at the moment the applicant's position is that they are requesting that there isn't a time limit imposed on the proposal. So I think that's just one point. I mean, secondly, in terms of the wording, if the committee feels that the wording needs to be more strong in terms of identifying an objection in that written response, then obviously that can be incorporated in if that's the feeling of the committee.
Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. For me, the 40 years no open end, and actually most projects that environmentally that I've had any dealings with, what we do is we have an end of life plan. I can see nothing in this, and that greatly concerns me. Solar panels, 25, 30 years life maximum. There'll be some changeovers within there. There's more unanswered in what we've been presented this morning than what there is answers. So I will second Councillor Smith's proposal to answer it in a robust form. Thank you.
And of course, what you haven't mentioned is solar panels are wonderful, but it's the battery packs and the lithium attached to it and the chemicals within those packs, which are semi-precious metals, whatever, but certainly very, very difficult to mine, and in some cases in battery packs can be quite toxic. Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you very much. I think we're quite like-minded on this one. It seems to be a bit gone mad, really. The world's gone mad. We do want renewable energy. We've still got huge swathes of industrial buildings with no solar panels on the roof. And then we go and cover our agricultural fields, which are currently in use, growing food, instead with solar panels. And it just seems bizarre that we don't actually start in the most sensible places, and the policy does say that it should be on brownfield sites first as a preference. So I don't know what happened to the sequential test for brownfield sites, but nevertheless. So 2,800 acres. You've got to think that Lincolnshire is one of the best producers of wheat in the country. And so 2,800 acres times, say, 5 tonnes to the acre is modest. Then that is a lot of wheat, a lot of food that is not being produced here and will have to be got from somewhere else. Energy seems to me a lot easier to transmit through wires than food. Then so I do think that the problem of this is the size of it, and that's why it's so difficult, because it does change the character of the landscape, which was the key planning point that we started with. And I think that worries me a lot, because I do see it as being I see it as being industrialized. But even if you just say that it's going to be, instead of what looks like countryside, it's going to be solar panels. I think it's a very uneasy change, and one that would not be that isn't welcomed when there are other solutions available to us on the renewable energy front. So whilst our support moves towards renewable energy, and there are lots that we've done, and the local plan has been really transformational, you know, with new planning applications coming in that are energy efficient, you know, actually using less energy, and also got solar panels and so on the roof. You know, we've transformed our new planning guidelines. And so this is a bit of old policy that's coming forward. And I think it's just very unfortunate. And I hope, I also wonder about, you know, as was being pointed out, the real plans, because I think the life of these panels is not 40 years. The panels will need replacing. So you know, there's something should be in here about the transport and all of those things that have to take place to change the panels. I guess maybe it is, but you know, making sure that there's these are. And then also the decommissioning, and it is described here, some work on decommissioning, but again, it needs to be a maximum period of time that's in there. So I think all in all, I want to support the comments that are in here, and actually I would have strengthened them as well. That was also in my mind. And the point about all this land is, as we said, mainly agricultural. It is currently growing food, and that I think is quite important, even if it is 3B. It's still growing good food. So thank you. Thanks for your help. Thank you. Support recommendation.
Okay, so Mr McBride's moving his microphone, so I don't know if you wanted to come back.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thanks, and thanks for spotting that. So in terms of just the wording, I obviously get the feeling that there is also concern about the longevity, that at the moment and there is no end date, so perhaps that also needs to be included in the wording that goes back around that issue as well. So if that's the feeling of the committee, then I'm sure we can find some appropriate words to reflect that if that's wants to be added into the recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that. So I was going to come back to Councillor Smith and just say that, okay, we've got a proposal from you, seconded by Councillor Skinner, which I'm sure that you're both going to be quite happy to support. But the issue is that you're saying that we need to go back with regard to a more robust statement than we currently have. And Councillor Mr McBride is, I'm sorry, I'm promoting you. Mr McBride's commenting with regard to longevity, and yes, the issue is with regard to the replacement of the panels. It's the battery packs and the lifespan of the batteries. It's to do with the loss of food production within. What else have I missed within here?
That's correct, Chairman. But one thing I'd add, which I omitted from my original point, which Councillor Overton has helpfully reminded me on, is we are the nation's breadbasket, and this is a issue of national food security, and we've already seen with what's happened with Ukraine. We aren't food sufficient, and the harm that does to our residents and the country as a whole. And I think it's important that in that recommendation we explicitly mention the issue of national food security, Chairman, because whilst it's mentioned, it isn't explicitly mentioned that this is actually a national security issue, because as we've seen, what happens when we don't have enough food and we rely on external partners who are often in troubled waters and troubled neighbourhoods, as it were. Our people suffer at the end of the day, Chairman. But no, you've hit everything else on the head, Chairman, with what should be contained.
Is nodding at me, so I presume the seconding, you're supportive of that. Okay, I don't see the need to go back to Mr McBride at this moment, so I will say, okay, you've heard the debate, you understand what the recommendation is, you can see it there, but it does need to be beefed up as we've identified. So all in favour of that, please show now. Thank you. Anybody against? One against. Any abstentions? So therefore, everybody was for bar one, and there was one against. So that is therefore carried. Okay, I'll move you on to the next application, which is 5.2, and this is the electricity application at Heckfen Solar. So an officer introduction. It's Mr Willis this time.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Yeah, similar to the last report, the report in front of members today is in two parts. It contains the local impact report relating to the Heckington Fen solar development, and also a recommendation with regard to the council's position to be reported to the examining authority on that application. In terms of the Heckington Fen scheme, the examination has started on this project. The examination starts with a preliminary meeting and the first issue-specific hearings on the 19th and 20th of September, and the timetable has recently been published. It sets out the various deadlines for submissions as part of that process. The first of which is the local impact report, which is why the report's in front of members today. And that report, as Mr McBride mentioned earlier, is effectively a report that seeks to set out the council's position with regard to the impacts of the scheme, whether that be positive, neutral or negative. The report itself focuses principally on those matters where the county council has a statutory function or an area of expertise or potential concern at this stage. I will say that it's not intended to give a complete summary of what the development is or the content of the application, and I think we've heard some conversations earlier about, for example, management plans, etc. So it's not intended to do that, it's just intended to give an overview of the impacts. And the intention is to highlight to the examining authority the council's main concern. In terms of the slides then, if I can start with the first slide. So the Heckington Fen Solar Park is being promoted by Ecotricity. It's a ground-mounted solar photovoltaic electricity generation station, including energy storage. And you can see from the plan it lies within the administrative areas both North Kesteven District Council and Boston Borough Council. The site itself, in total, that includes both the energy park and the cable connection, extends to 644.5 hectares. As I say, it's comprised mainly of two areas: an energy park, which is 524 hectares, located solely within the North Kesteven district, and that would house the PV generating panels, the storage and battery storage, with the cable corridor extending to the Bicker Fen substation located within Boston Borough. The energy park itself is located in an area of agricultural land within East Heckington. It's approximately 3.7 kilometres east of the village of Heckington and 8.9 kilometres west of the town of Boston. The nearest residential and commercial properties are located along the A17 and Sidebar Lane. They're all over 150 metres itself from the development. There is, however, a facility, an educational vocational courses facility located on the southwestern boundary. The facility itself will be capable of exporting 400 megawatts AC energy or 500 megawatts direct current of electricity to the substation, and it includes a battery energy storage facility which would hold, subject to confirmation of technology, between 200 to 400 megawatts of electricity. Can I have a next slide, please? Thank you. I should say the application itself is seeking a 40-year development consent order time limit. So contrary to what we've just discussed on Cottam, the applicant is proposing a 40-year time limit as part of the development consent order. That would cover both the construction operation and maintenance period. This slide really just shows the main energy park. You can see the area largely depicted in blue identifies the areas for the location of the panel. So the park itself is effectively one containerised segment area of land. The red area in the centre, well, just to the centre right of that screen, is the area that's allocated for the battery energy storage facility. Can I have the next slide, please? This just shows a plan showing the indicative route for the cable connection. As I say, it would travel south out of the site and then travel further south towards connection to the Bicker Fen substation. There would be some upgrade works required to that substation to enable connection to that station. And also on that point, the battery energy, just to clarify, is an import-export, so it has that dual functionality for both. You'll be able to export energy from the energy park, but also import from the national grid as well. Next slide, please. This is just a plan showing the battery storage. It's only indicative at this stage. It would depend upon the technology chosen at the time, but it gives you an idea of indicatively the central substation location and battery storage containerised unit. Subject to necessary consents, the applicant's proposing to commence operations construction in spring 2025. That would be at the earliest. It would take around 30 months to build, with an expected generation starting around autumn 2027. The 40-year life would therefore extend to around 2067, and following that period, there'd be a decommissioning period of between 6 to 18 months. In terms of the local impact report then, I won't go through every topic in area. As I say, the focus of the impact report is principally focused on those areas where Lincolnshire County Council has a particular interest or expertise. So there are areas that aren't explicitly covered in here. The impact report itself draws upon the conclusions that have been made by the applicant in their own assessment as part of the environmental statement, and similarly to the previous report, takes also into account comments from internal specialists within the organisation, but also external assistance that's been sought, in particular on landscape. In terms of those issues, I'll just summarise perhaps some of those. The report details in terms of ecology, impacts on ecology. During the construction phase, there's been identified that there would be some minor adverse impacts on ecological features during the construction phase. The applicant, however, has proposed a package of mitigation and enhancement measures as part of the scheme to offset those. That would include 424 hectares of grazing species grassland beneath the panels, intended to be used for sheep grazing. There's also an intended provision of a community orchard within the scheme, as well as wildflower meadow, and 8.5 linear kilometres of new hedgerow will be planted. So in terms of biodiversity net gain, there'll be a significant increase compared to the existing baseline. I think the figures have been quoted around 102% increase from the baseline in terms of BNG units, habitat units, and 230% increase in hedgerow units. So in terms of impacts, the assessment and the applicant's own assessment has identified that there will be negative impacts during the construction phase. However, there will be positive effects to be secured by virtue of the biodiversity net gain in particular. And you'll see within the report, those conclusions are obviously agreed with in respect of the officer's position. The main areas, I won't go, I'm conscious of time, but the report is in front of members. In terms of the main areas of concern, at this stage, they principally relate to landscape and the land use change, principally the impacts on agricultural land. In terms of landscape, again, the applicant's own assessment has been involved with dialogue with the county and other consultees to discuss the landscape scheme and the methodology which is undertaken. But given clearly the size and scale of the development, the impact itself has been identified that during the construction phase there would be significant short-term adverse effects as a result of changes during the construction. And in particular, there will be major and significant impacts in terms of users of the A17 and the public rights of way. During operation stage, those impacts would be mitigated or reduced by virtue of some of the mitigation measures been identified, and also as a consequence of the siting and location of some of the taller elements within the scheme's footprint. However, notwithstanding that, there would still be limited but significant adverse effects upon users within a 500-metre range. Beyond that, those impacts would perhaps lessen, given the distance further away from that site. However, as part of the scheme, as I say, there would still be impacts clearly in close proximity, and in particular from permissive path users and the public rights of way system. The landscape-appointed consultant has reviewed the information that's been presented by the applicant within their submission, and is generally satisfied with the methodology that has been utilised in terms of the overall approach and its presentation. However, you will see that there is, again, and I think this has been mentioned previously, a concern regarding the, if you like, the level of assessment weight that's been attached to the impacts. The conclusion principally being that the applicant has only assessed impacts above moderate as being and having a significant effect, whereas the council's position is that that should be a lower level, and as a consequence there's effectively downplayed some of the potential impacts in terms of the assessment. In terms of the actual overall stance, the conclusion is by reason of its mass and scale, then the solar park itself would have a significant adverse landscape and impact both on the character and visual amenity. Similar to what we've heard previously, it would transform the local landscape from a current tranquil, open character, agricultural character of an area to that of one of a large solar park. There's also concerns about the impacts on receptors as a result of changing views, particularly given the nature and extent of the solar development. In terms of land use, and I will focus on that. If I can have the next slide, please. And we've heard briefly about BMV and soils. This plan here just shows an overview of the agricultural land classification survey that's been done, the results of the survey that's been done on this particular plot. That survey has been done to a suitable standard in terms of the methodology. What that study has shown is that around half of the energy park, 49.4% of the total land, is actually comprised of grade 1 to 3A BMV agricultural land, with the remaining 50.6%, which is the light green on that plan, being grade 3B. So in effect, nearly 50% of the total site is proportions of grade 1, 2 and grade 3A, with only a small proportion of that being non-agricultural land. You can see from the plan there's quite a mix within the site in terms of the distribution of those different grades within the site. They don't necessarily follow natural field boundaries, but there is, as a consequence, areas which differ. I will say through the design process, the applicant has already revised the scheme to take out some fields which were identified principally as grade 1 and 2. They were areas in that southwest in particular corner. So there's already been some revisions to remove some of those fields that solely contain grade 1 or 2. Notwithstanding that, there is clearly a large proportion of grade 1 to 3A within the site. The applicant's position is that notwithstanding that, there would be no overall loss of BMV on the basis that the land and the soil resource would be retained. After the life of the panels, which would be 40 years, the land would be returned back to agricultural use, so that that loss would not be permanent. There is also an intention, as I've alluded to carry out an agricultural enterprise on the land, maintaining that use through the sheep grazing. Discussions are ongoing about how to secure that and to ensure that that agricultural practice would continue, and that would be an ongoing discussion and an issue for the examination. However, notwithstanding that, as again we mentioned to earlier, that the concern here is that there's a loss of the productive arable farmland as a consequence of the scheme, which is a different agricultural enterprise to that of sheep grazing, and therefore queried the value in terms of a comparison to those two practices. As you can see in the report, there is a concern about not only the impact of the loss, and I say that in inverted commas, of the agricultural land by virtue of this scheme, not only on this scheme, but also in combination with the other schemes that are across the county. And so whilst the applicant has argued that the total land take would only amount to less than around 1% of the total of Lincolnshire's agricultural land, despite that, the officers do have concerns with regard to the impacts of that land, loss of that land in terms of productive arable use. I haven't put on, as I say, in terms of the report, the scheme does look at the positives and the negatives of the scheme. In terms of the positives, we do recognise there will be positives in terms of renewable energy generation, also a significant increase in terms of biodiversity net gain. There would also be positives to be created through the scheme through the community orchard and a permissive public right of way. And there would also be socio-economic benefits to be gained insofar as both business rates into a local area. There would be local spend during the construction phase, in particular for demands for accommodation and use of retail and commercial services. However, those benefits aren't considered to outweigh the negatives overall. So the report, as I say, is in two parts. Is one, to approve a local impact report for submission to the examining authority for consideration by the examining authority as part of the examination. And secondly, that the Council's formal position and response in respect of the proposal be approved for submission equally for the examination, so that's before the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Hiding within our IT system, I believe we have Laura White, who would like to speak to us remotely. Laura, if you're there, we can afford you 3 minutes to address the committee. There might be a question or two to come back, but yes, we can see you, so the floor is yours when you're ready.
Perfect, thank you. Good morning, councillors. My name's Laura and I'm a project manager at Electricity. We have offices in Gloucestershire and Lincolnshire. A councillor once said to me there is no silver bullet when it comes to renewable energy, and I agree, it is hard to please everyone, but we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and we need to do more to fix the climate crisis. Electricity believes there is another way, and we have been making and selling only renewable electricity to our customers for over 25 years. This solar park will allow agriculture to continue, moving it from arable to pasture, whilst making electricity and improving biodiversity. It's a triple winner. A recent consultation from the Central Lincolnshire Local Plans Manager was looking for landowners to confirm their interest in offering sites for biodiversity enhancement for 30 years. This solar park would offer this and more much needed renewable energy. Combined with these benefits and working towards net zero, the project will contribute over £1 million a year in business rates, create over 400 jobs during construction, followed by 5 full-time equivalent jobs during the operation, plus an additional 7 in the wider community, without losing any jobs from farming. The Shepherd will also require personnel. Once operational, it could power 100,000 households and avoid the equivalent of 75,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions every year. The solar panels come with a 30-year warranty, so we expect these to last the lifetime of the project. Moving to agricultural land, 81% of the site is grade 3. Grades 1 and 2 are considered the better grades, and grades 4 and 5 less so. Approximately half of the UK's agricultural land is grade 3. Grade 3 is then split into A and B. Grade 3A falls into the best and most versatile banding, and taking this site, 11% is grade 1, 7% is grade 2, and 81% is grade 3. Over 450 soil augurs have been taken across the site, and from this we know 30% is grade 3A and 50% is grade 3B. So the land is 50% not best and most versatile, and out of the 49%, 30% is in the lowest bracket that can be considered best and most versatile. So as part of this scheme, we're committing to agriculture continuing, and this will be a legal obligation secured through requirement 8 of the draft development consent order, which your officers will help shape over the course of the examination. Some say land grading should be based on what the site actually grows, rather than theoretically what could be possible. In this case, the landowner predominantly grows feed wheat for the European market. This is not the same wheat for bread production for human consumption. The landowner no longer grows oilseed rape due to a particular type of beetle that cannot be treated with regulated chemicals, and land is not suitable for potatoes and other vegetables due to soil constraints and irrigation requirements. There's a full report on this by Savills in the planning application. Wheat is the only crop grown in recent years and requires significant fertilisers, chemicals and herbicides to stay on top of the blackgrass constraint, which is problematic for farmers due to its early seed dispersal. And of course, agrochemicals aren't great for invertebrates, watercourses, flora and fauna. Planning permission isn't needed for the landowner to turn a site over to cattle or sheep grazing or environmental schemes, or to grow miscanthus, which is a crop burnt to produce energy. This project offers a scheme which can remain in agriculture whilst producing electricity and offering ecological enhancements. It's well contained, with few objections from your local community on land that's already been consented for renewable energy. So I urge your support for this scheme and for your committee to recommend approval to the Planning Inspectorate. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to welcome Councillor Mike Brooks, who's come to talk to the application.
Thank you, Chairman. Bicker Fen is part of my Boston Rural Division, and I've got the following comments to make about the Hackington Fen Solar Park impact statement. I do support the opposition to the project on the use of best and most versatile land basis, and also the impact on the landscape. But I'm wanting to focus on the transport access and public rights of way section on the impact statement, which is section 7.7. And on 7.7.5, it talks about access for vehicles to the existing Bicker Fen substation will continue via the A52 Hall Road for construction vehicles associated with the extension to the substation. The problem here is the Hall Road does not go all the way to the substation. It bypasses Bicker Village, which is great, but it then leads on to Cowbridge Road, which is a very narrow country lane with 2 vehicles unable to pass. The heavy construction traffic causes a nuisance to the residents, a great nuisance to the residents, I would say, and damages the carriageway and verges. And this disruption occurs regularly with each of the energy developments year on year over the last 20 years or so, and they all require extensions to the substation, which takes months to complete. This will continue to happen for subsequent schemes, which are in the pipeline. And I think the cumulative impact of these schemes over the years should be referred to in the impact report. There's no reference to Cowbridge Road in the impact report. It just talks about A52 Hall Road, which sounds great because you imagine a Hall Road taking you all the way to the substation. That's in fact not the case. There's certainly, we've heard the term short-term adverse effects caused in certain parts of the scheme, but these short-term adverse effects happen on a continuous basis. The extension to the substation happens, all the issues, and then a short break, and then it happens again. And these, and we're living with a carriageway and verges that are getting chewed up by these projects, and the residents having to put up with this disruption over and over again. 3 service roads have been built for various schemes over the years onto Bicker Fen to avoid Bicker Village, but the pinch point of Cowbridge Road has never been addressed. And why? It's because they're all done a scheme at a time, and we come down to the short-term adverse effects on that particular section. It's not short-term, it's happening time after time. So a resident of Cowbridge Road has informed me that the Hackington Fen project has given him written undertaken not to use Cowbridge Road for any of their construction traffic. Can't see how that's going to happen without them making some special provision coming from the service roads that are already there. I'm also concerned, moving on from that, about a statement in paragraph 779, which states, should it be necessary to route vehicles via Bicker, the applicant considers the impact will be negligible. Well, it shouldn't be anything because it mustn't happen. These service roads have been put in to avoid the village of Bicker, and that's what they've been built to avoid. So I would say so there's some comment needs to be made on that we mustn't be taking construction traffic through Bicker Village. And that's my submission to the Planning Committee. And thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. I'm just getting a little bit ahead of myself because I should have said, are there any questions of Laura White from the committee? Councillor Mrs Overton, please.
Thank you. Just a little bit of clarification. You did say that they have a 30-year, that the panels have a 30-year life expectancy, and that would last the life of the project. But I think the project's 40 years. So could you just clarify, please? Thank you.
Sorry, what I said there was that they have a 30-year warranty, so we expect them to last for the lifetime of the project. So whilst the panel providers will sell them to us with a 30-year warranty, and as with a lot of these things, they'll last longer than the warranted time. So we're expecting them to last for the lifetime of 40 years, yeah.
See, thank you.
Are there any other questions of Laura? Sorry about that. That's just me doing a bit of slippage here. Are there any comments or questions of Councillor Brooks? We've got him in the room. Do you want to grill him? I'll give you the chance. Okay, so I'll go back to Mr. Willis now and say, would you like to pick up on anything that's been said?
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, on the point of traffic, I think, you know, the comments are noted. What I would say at this stage is the applicant has obviously carried out a transport assessment. That's been looked at from the highways colleagues, and I look content at this stage. Notwithstanding that, though, the issues that you've raised, in particular about routing and the commitments that the applicant has made, will be something and can be something that we would obviously bring up and discuss further through the examination process at hearings, and certainly can be making representations to get confidence that in the event that the DCO is granted, that routing strategy is enforced. So I can certainly take that away and put that down for a continuing dialogue. In terms of whether or not there's any revision required to the wording in Part B of the recommendation, I guess I'll leave that to members, really. Thank you.
So I'm therefore going to open it to committee. So who would like to go into batting? Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. With regards to point 7.3.13, is the 10% biodiversity net gain actually enforceable, as this application will obviously be potentially dealt with before next April when the legal requirement comes into force through the Environment Act? Secondly, Chairman, as detailed in the report and as Mark Willis has detailed, there is significant best most versatile agricultural land on this site. I suspect, Chairman, if we were determining this application ourselves, this would be refused on those grounds alone. I appreciate that we're not, and I won't go into the arguments around 3B, as I already alluded to in the previous application. As colleagues know my view on this, that it should be considered one of the same as it used to be. Finally, Chairman, with respect to 7.8.10 in the report, I do not believe it is an appropriate assertion for the applicant to make such a claim, as these schemes, especially on the scale they are very new to us and to the country as a whole, and we do not know the long-term harm they will do to the soil. So to say there will be no harm to the quality of the land, I think, Chairman, is totally inappropriate. And personally, as I've already alluded to, Chairman, we shouldn't be using the nation's breadbasket as a test subject for this, and I'm quite happy to support the recommendation and propose that when we send it to the examining authority, we're proposing for it to be refused.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you very much. Yeah, much the same way. Although some of the items have been addressed, it's supposedly going to have agricultural use throughout, but it will affect the use of the land. In farming, we have something called controlled traffic management, and that actually does mean by controlling where the tram lines are, the productivity of the field is maintained. But there's a claim that everybody was happy. Clearly, the local members spoke, and as a fellow Boston councillor, I can say that there has been problems out there with the various different schemes, and if this substation needs to grow yet again, it's whether it's actually whether it fits in the environment. We're becoming a very industrialised environment out there, and I don't really think that fits our way of working in this county. Just one more comment on the, let's say, the additional facts of every subsequent application, it's assumed that all of the land that's 1 and 2 is growing actually food, but unfortunately you can actually add into that the energy versus food debate, because a good percentage of that is actually now growing on energy crops, so even more pressure on a reducing amount of fields. Thank you. I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. McBride, any comment? No. Okay. Back to the committee then. Councillor Mrs. Overton.
Thank you. I think it's important to face the facts, and that's why it's, you know, we can't be glib about these things, and whether it's 30 years or 50 years, you know, these things do need to be correct. And I think the point about the sheep growing underneath as well was, you know, I'm not really, I don't see many solar panels with sheep growing under, and I think also the key point that was raised earlier is that it can't be, it's very hard to see how that can be enforced as part of the process long term over 40 years. And if, you know, if sheep were the best use of that land, then it would have sheep on it. You know, the farmer would put whatever is most appropriate, whatever is the most profitable for that land, and that's what it's doing now. So I think actually one should face up to the fact that there are things that are not going to be produced as well as what is going to be produced with any new application. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So I don't see any further speakers, so I don't see Mr. McBride's not reaching for his microphone, so I will put it to a vote. It's proposed by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Skinner, that the application is taken forward, resolved in the format of A and B, according to the Sorry, Councillor Willis is the man. Not that's why Councillor McBride is Mr. McBride is not looking for his microphone. It's Councillor Willis. Did you, Mr. Willis, like to comment? Would you like to be promoted to become a councillor as well?
I'll stay quiet on that.
Or demoted.
Thanks, Chairman. It was just a couple of points about those commitments, I guess, with regard to BNG, so biodiversity net gain, and sheep management, grazing. Yes, I mean, these are issues that are live and will form part very much of the discussion that officers take forward at the examination. In terms of BNG, I can say that that conversation has already taken place. I mentioned at the start, we've already had one of the first sessions of the issue hearings related to this, which looks at the development consent order itself, which is effectively the consent. Within that, there is a requirement for wording to be agreed about the biodiversity net gain, and we have already pushed hard for that commitment to be increased substantially in line with what the applicant says. So if the DCO were to be granted, the applicant has a legal obligation to deliver on that, and that any breach of that in terms of management is an enforceable matter. In terms of sheep, again, similarly, recognise the applicant's commitment to offer grazing. What we are saying is that needs to be guaranteed. If it's being offered as mitigation for the productive arable land, we want that firmed up and secured. And the mechanism by which that will be secured is something that, again, is very live and very current. Part of that is, again, through the management plans that have been submitted by the applicant. However, you know, one of the conversations we've had is if we want to give that credence, we need to be confident that's secured. And that's also for a matter that we were saying the examining authority needs to be confident. So I can assure you that the applicant is keen to secure that, and we would ensure that that would form very much part of the mitigation if that is something that if the DCA is ultimately granted. So it was just on those 2 points of commitment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I can see you now. You're not hiding behind legal. Very nice hairdo. So I will now move you back to the committee, and I will say proposed by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Skinner. Nobody else wishing to speak. Recommendation as printed with all the comments that have been made this morning. If you're in favour, please show now. Okay, thank you very much. Those against, please show now. Abstentions, please show now. So that's 1 against, 1 abstention. The rest of the committee were for. So therefore, that is carried. Okay, well, it's been a slightly longer committee meeting than normal. I'm not going to apologise for that because the topics are worth debating and are worth spending time over. I'm going to wish you all a safe journey home, and I'm going to wish Noy a happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Because you all don't know this, do you? So there we go. Anyway, I'll see you all very soon. Don't forget we have a site visit coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm not going to say that on the system because the system is currently being broadcast. But I'll just remind you.